Welcome back to How to Craft Fair. This is episode 34 in the Craft Fair booth review series. In this series, I take a look at a real craft fair booth submitted by one of my channel members, and I'll break the review down into 10 different segments. I'll point out things that the vendor is doing well and should continue to do, and then also identify some areas where maybe there's some room for improvement. Along the way, keep your craft fair booth in mind so that you can take these tips in order to take your booth to the next level. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, and so for today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at Margaret's booth, and her business name is the Glass Puddle, and she's based out of Washington State. So we've got that one checked off. And primarily what she makes is fused glass garden art, functional home decor, and jewelry. Okay, so we're going to be looking at various glass works here at the booth. And for today's episode, we're going to be looking at a 20 by 10 booth, so a pretty large area. And let's go ahead and take a look. Okay, so here is the first view of the booth. Really good angle here. We're pretty much looking at it head on the way a shopper would approach it. So we can see 20 foot wide by 10 foot deep. And the first element that we're going to cover here in this review is displays. So we'll kind of just work our way from left to right. We have a lot of different pictures in this review, okay? And when it benefits, we'll go ahead and just flip it to different angles. But for now, let's stick to this panned back look because, again, it just gives us a good overall sense of the usage of space here. So working from left to right, we have these racks. There's several collapsible racks, and these racks fold in half basically. So you can see there's a little bit of seam here in the center on the bottom shelf, and there's seams that work all the way up in the center. Well, these racks basically collapse down from this center seam point, and they get relatively compact for transport. Okay, so really nice displays here, gives you good height, and I like the fact that you've chosen a couple of different heights here just to switch it up. So if this was just one wall of the same height, that would get, I don't know, it would get a little bit repetitive, maybe a little bit boring, but the fact that you've kind of tiered it down here towards the center, I like that a lot. So good choice here. And then I'll zoom in just a touch here in the center, and we can see a couple of different displays. There's a riser on this table right here. There's a 3-level riser. Then, of course, we have a jewelry display, and then a couple of other jewelry displays here where it's, sort of like showing off the necklace feature. And then we have a couple items hanging here. I believe these are the sun catchers. If we zoom in a little bit on the secondary photo, we can see some of those displays that we just mentioned here. Also, some vases being used. And as I said before, on this side, there's a hanging type of display where these sun catchers can hang down from. So this center table has a lot going on as far as the displays. As we take a look at the right side of the booth, we've got another side table right here, and there's a considerably higher riser. Now this is 5 levels on both sides, and then we have a stacked angular display. A lot of times you'll see these with people who make greeting cards, so that's pretty common. Then over here we have a wire rack. Okay, so some people call that like a grid wall. And that's a standalone grid wall right here. And you've utilized it in order to display your magnets. So you've got those, it's like a whiteboard, like a dry erase board, but it's also, you can use it for magnets too. So that's a good usage there. I like that a lot. And then finally, on the right side of the booth, we have sort of like these pedestals. Okay, so there's like these almost monolithic looking pedestals here. There's one over here, but then as we pan back to the booth as a whole, you'll see a couple more in the center, front and center. Okay, so they're standing right here. The angle that we just looked at is over in this direction. And then as we get to the right side, the lower right portion of the booth, there are really big, almost like potted planters, and those are containing basically some yard decor. Okay, so some things that you can have out in your yard, almost like another type of sun catcher. So there's a lot to digest. There's a lot going on, and one of the questions that Margaret had for me as we prepped for this booth review was questioning how much space is needed for the booth. And I think a 20 by 10 is pretty much spot on. I can't see any way that you can condense this down any further. So I would just keep rolling with the 20 by 10s. Another point that I want to make too is that you want a lot of space. You want like a lot of elbow room because a lot of these materials are quite fragile, and accidents can happen. Accidents will happen eventually. Margaret is pretty new to craft fairs. She just started out in April of 2024. Okay, so we're pretty much approaching maybe like the half a year mark as we get into these fall shows for the 2024 calendar year. And these little bumps and bruises are going to happen, people bumping into stuff and whatnot. So being a little bit more spread out is always a good thing. I would much rather have space, some extra breathing space, as opposed to things being a little bit too tight. Okay, so if you're going to veer one way or the other, I would definitely err on the side of caution. Okay. Now, one thing I wanted to mention during this display segment is that I would be careful about using too many tall, narrow display stands, as those are by far the easiest to tip over, whether they get bumped into by someone or if eventually you start doing outdoor markets, weather could become a factor with these types of things, especially when you're on uneven ground. Indoors, it's a little bit more controlled. Of course, you're not worried about wind, and the floor is going to be super flat and all that stuff. But outdoors, I could see something like this being very tricky, and also on the indoor side, I could see accidents happening. So this could potentially result in injury, but also just general loss of product as well. That's always kind of heartbreaking, just to see your creations essentially go to waste, So just something to consider with these taller displays that are standalone. It's has me a little bit nervous. Okay, so that's something that I would be a little bit careful about at a craft fair, as opposed to like a more formal environment, like an art show or, perhaps like an art gallery where, the environment is far more controlled. So with a craft fair, it's a little bit, you got to have a little bit more caution when it comes to this type of display. But yeah, all in all, I think you're doing a good job. I like the way things are displayed. I like the variety of the displays. And with the fact that you have a variety of products, you need to be able to showcase them how each individual item is going to be shown off the best. And that's going to change from product to product. So you need to be flexible with how you're displaying things, and not rigid in that, I only want to have one display. But if you have like 7 or 8 different types of products, that's not always going to work. That's not always going to translate from display to display. So I like the fact that you've focused on a more individualized approach with the products, because I think that you're showcasing them to the best of your ability for each product. Okay, so now we're going to talk about pricing. And pricing at the booth, I would say, is definitely above average. Very nicely done. It's clear, easy to understand, and it also incorporates your business branding. So that's always nice too, to be able to see certain fonts, certain color sets in the pricing. That always shows that the vendor is keeping the marketing in mind in elements that aren't so obvious as far as marketing goes. So really nice job there. Just wanted to kind of point that out. It checks all the boxes for what you want to see on pricing signage. So this is an up close look at some of the pricing. You've also got bundle pricing available, so that's always a good thing. It encourages those multiple sales. So for example, if you're not familiar with bundle pricing, each item is $15, but then if you get 3 of them, you're essentially getting $5 off by buying 3. Okay, so that is an example of bundle pricing. Good job giving the people some options. You never know if People might run into a situation where they really enjoy your items and, maybe they want one for themselves, but then they've got someone else in their lives that they can buy for. Somebody's birthday's coming up or an anniversary, something like that. It's always nice to give people those options to think about. And I definitely encourage vendors to do this because it does translate into better sales at booths. And just looking at a couple of different angles as we roam around the booth a little bit, we can see those pricing signs located in different areas. Okay, so you've done a nice job of not only doing that in one section, but spreading it out in different areas throughout the booth. So good job with that. So let's go ahead and move on to signage because we're going to spend a little bit of time on this. You've done a really nice job with this. Several signs at the booth serve different purposes, so that already is a nice box checked again. You want to have signs that convey different things, okay? So you don't want to just have like one giant sign that kind of covers all the bases. That's a little bit overwhelming, and I think it's better to spread them out throughout the booth and kind of sprinkle them in, serving different purposes. So if we take a look at this sign right here, this is definitely a marketing type of sign. It explains the background of the vendor, the background of the origins of the business, techniques that are used. Just it's an inspirational thing to see from a vendor. And again, I know I talk a lot about this on the channel, but craft fairs are special because shoppers get to meet the artists. They get to know the people who make these items by hand. And that's one of the best things about a craft fair. So to have a sign like this present at the booth, it's fantastic. It's just a really nice touch. Now we've also got a sign like this at the checkout area where there is some nice marketing happening here. And it's also letting people know how they can make their payments. Okay, so this is great to see. This is a nice little 2-for-1 sign, showing those payment options and then also trying to push that website. So that's great to see right there. And also, not to mention, it does show the branding. So we got the same fonts, the same colors. We've got the actual logo right there of the business. Really well done and great placement, by the way, having this at the checkout area. So sometimes you'll see a sign like this where it's nicely done, but it might not be where the checkout area is. And that's kind of like that final step that you want to make sure that you're getting. Okay, so you want to have it where it makes the most sense at the booth, and you've done this very well. So again, another great sign at the booth. Okay, and so as we look at the front of the booth again, I'll just scroll down a little bit, zoom in, and we'll take a look at this sign right here. It says, "We love custom orders. Your vision, our creation, just for you." Got the QR code there, and it says one a different color, a different shape, a bunch for your party. Grab your phone and scan that fancy QR code or fill out the info card below and share your project ideas. Okay, so great sign. I like it. Again, incorporating the branding, so that's always nice. Placement of it, though, is not great. Okay, so it just kind of being on the ground over there, not the best. I would probably try to sneak this around the checkout area if possible, because that's probably where you'll be located as the vendor for most of the day. Okay, you've kind of got like your setup there in that back corner. And with a sign like this, it's very likely that if people are interested in having a custom order, they'll probably want to ask you a question or two. Okay, so this sign in particular, it would make more sense to be close to wherever you're going to be. Okay, because it's again likely going to be attached with some questions from shoppers if they're interested. So I would just relocate that sign. Wouldn't change anything on it. It's very nice, but just the location of it could be a little bit better. Now, let's go ahead and move into the marketing segment. And there's quite a bit that we're going to talk about in the marketing segment, maybe more than any other segment during this review. So let's go ahead and dive in. Now, we're going to talk a lot about how to market outside of craft fairs during this segment, but I'll sneak in a couple of quick tips here for what to do at a show. Okay, so your clipboard down here. Let's take a look at that. As we zoom in here, we can see that it is a sign-up clipboard, so likely gathering emails from shoppers. Always a great idea to do this. It is never a bad time to work on your email contact list. Vendors continue to build on that. I know it's an old school method, but social media it can come and go. Sometimes the algorithm works with you, sometimes it works against you. You never know what can happen with pages. You're kind of at the mercy of whatever's happening at a social media company, okay? But your email, you're in control of that, all right? So you've got these contact lists, use them. Send out monthly or even quarterly newsletters. Quarterly is great too. Keep people in the loop on your upcoming events, any kind of sales or deals you might be doing at your booth, new products that you might be working on or rolling out, even just showing people your techniques of your craft. There's so many different things that you can send in a newsletter just to keep people in the loop and remind them that, hey, you know, you're working on cool stuff and hopefully they can come and check you out. But again, the location of this could be better. It's kind of just sitting on the floor and, you know, it sort of feels like an afterthought. Okay. A lot of work went into making this happen and getting it to this point where you've got it at your show. But then, you know, just be sure that you're setting yourself up for success by having that in a better location. Even for some older folks, for example, you know, some people have a little bit of a hard time kind of, you know, bending down that far and whatnot. And, you know, some people might be interested, or maybe people have a little bit of a hard time seeing where, you know, it's just far down and, you know, they're not going to bother with it. So, like I said, you put a lot of work and effort into making that happen. Just make sure that people can access it easily and it's in a really nice, convenient location. Now, again, other things that you're doing at your booth, really nice. The banner is great. The signage is fantastic. The incorporation of your branding colors is really nice. A lot of really good things happening at the booth. But now let's talk about some things outside of the booth. Now, the website is underutilized. Just based on what I can see in these photos of your booth, you've got a really nice selection of items with a variety of designs and purposes that you sell. However, the website only shows a couple of products. On top of that, the way that they're showcased could use a little bit of improvement. And in that, I'm specifically talking about product photography and brand photography. Okay, so I'm going to show you how you can capture some great product photos at home for a reasonable cost. Now, this method is pretty easy, and even those of you who have never done this type of photography before should be able to handle it and produce great photos. So here we go. Okay, so this is the setup that I use for product photography. I actually use it for my secondary channel, which is Vegas Chip Chronicles. I was a cab driver for many years and collected numerous casino chips, and I've just continued on with that collection. So I use a spinning display stand. Okay, so that is this item right here, and it's powered through a USB cable, so that would just hook up like, you know, right to a computer, which is kind of nice because I just input my photos and video directly into my computer anyway, so that works out conveniently. This spins either at 90 degrees, 90 degrees, 180 degrees, or 360 degrees around in a circle, or it kind of goes like back and forth like this. So this is really great for video. So if you have products that looked great, you know, from different angles, you know, that is a nice investment. This was literally only like $15 or $20. I'll include a link in the description below for this. And then the second thing is a light box. So a photography light box is basically just a cube that is also powered by USB, and it has an opening in it where you can put a camera phone, or if you have like a full-fledged camera, whatever you want to do, and it lights items up in a way that is just shown really well. It just disperses the light very well. So everything turns out good in this thing. I mean, even something as like a dull casino chip, that looks really good in here. So I can show you a few examples of videos that I've taken with this setup. This light box was probably about, I want to guess, $60. So all in, I was at about maybe $75, something like that. So really not bad. There's different light settings. There's different backgrounds. So it's not always like a white background. It comes with a whole bunch of different backgrounds that you can put. I think like right there at the bottom, it says 8 pieces. Yeah. So there's 8 different backdrops on this, and very, very nice. It's dimmable, so you can have it at full blast, or you can kind of back off and just have sort of a muted light on your items. So whatever works. But yeah, this is just the setup that I use. I wanted to show you guys, and kind of an example of how it turns out too with the casino chips. It's really good for smaller items, but these light boxes come in all different sizes. So for what I use it for, 12 inch by 12 inch by 12 inch, that works perfect for me. But I think they actually go up to like 16 inch, even 20 inch if you need it. So they go pretty big. So if you have larger items like the one that we've seen in today's video, that could still work out pretty well. So just wanted to show you that and how it works. All right, now that you've got some great photos, you have to get them posted to your website. There's no real secret to keeping a website up to date. You just have to dedicate the time and effort into doing it. And I know that, that might be kind of disappointing to hear, but I have a website of my own for How to Craft Fair, and it is a little bit of a beast. It's kind of a bigger website. It has a lot of different tabs and all this stuff. And I don't particularly love working on it anymore at this point, but it's just one of those things that, you have to do it. There's so many different ways that people can find you. And if people are doing Google searches, well, your website can be a great asset in people being able to find you. Okay. So it's really important that if you're dedicating resources, monetarily and with your time into having a .com website, that you see it through, So the best thing that I can say is maybe carve out some time weekly or even monthly and just stick to it. Just dedicate something on your calendar and say, hey, look, I'm not going to have any distractions during this time. This is going to be for updating the website, and let's just get through it, and if that's what it takes in order to make that happen, well, then so be it. But this can pay dividends in helping you to boost sales in between craft fairs and during your off season. So that's really important too, is that, it's not just all about what you can do at the craft fair. Sometimes it's about filling in those gaps in between the shows and during your off season that'll really kind of give you nice boosts in between those events. Okay. So think of the things that you can do in order to help those sections of time out as well. Now, in addition to your website, keep up the work that you're putting in on your Facebook page. Viewers, I've got Margaret's link to the Glass Puddle Facebook page down below in the video description. Be sure to show some love and follow. So like I said, you're off to a nice start on Facebook. Just keep posting, improve those photos, and keep doing your thing. Post when you're creating new things, and keep posting at events. So I like the fact that you've done a little bit of both there. You've, showed your upcoming posters of events, you've showed in progress photos, and then you've showed final result photos. So that's all really good content. You're doing a really nice job of mixing up these types of content that you're producing for your channel. Just give it time, and after a bit, your online presence will start to help your in-person success. Okay, so that takes a little bit of time too. Like I said, Margaret, she's been going at it since, April of 2024, and that's not a lot of time. That's not a lot of time to get the ball rolling online and get that help online that will start to show up at the in-person shows. And it's eventually going to happen, but you just got to give it, some time. So keep doing your thing. You're doing a great job, and, utilize that product photography to really make these items shine. All right, so now we're going to talk about vertical space, and this is definitely another strength at your booth. You're doing a good job of covering multiple levels of vision for the shopper, and it's nice to see so much space being utilized, not just side to side at your booth, but also up and down. So that's really important to catch all those various eye levels. The only thing that I would say is, those signs on the ground, we got to find a better spot for those. But as far as these planters go, I think that's fine because those come up quite a bit off the ground. And that is a really nice way to display something because that can actually give people an idea of how to display it at their house. So having a big like potted planter and whatnot, being able to stick those in there, somebody might actually just like the fact that they're displayed like that and be like, that's how I want to do it at home. So that's a really cool way of doing it because not only is it functional at the event, but it sparks ideas for people who might be interested in shopping and purchasing those items. So that was really nice to see right there. I like that quite a bit. But yeah, as far as vertical space goes, there's a lot to like. Vendors, remember that vertical space isn't important solely when it comes to your products. Take a look at how Margaret has positioned her main banner. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here so we can kind of take a look to see. We're going to focus on the center section for a little bit. It's centered and is placed high, overlooking the entire booth. In addition, the colored fabric that accents the banner is a really nice touch. It adds character, it gives that area of the booth some personality, and does just enough to enhance the vibe, but it's not distracting from everything else that's going on around there. Imagine how the banner would look without this bluish green fabric. It would look a lot different and maybe kind of stripped down, not quite as, classy and refined. It would change that area quite a bit. So the addition of the fabric is a really big highlight for me because when it comes to vertical space, it ties into the table display as well as creating a true floor to ceiling experience for the shopper. So it's really multifunctional. It does a really nice job of going up and vertical with the booth. And again, like I said, it's not just about going vertical with products and with displays. Think of the different ways that you can go vertical and make your booth like an enclosed experience and environment. That's very, very important. And this was nicely done. I really enjoyed this quite a bit. And it's not just done in one section. We can see it here on the side. We also have it utilized on the right side of the booth over here. So this is just something that was a very nice touch to see. I enjoyed this quite a bit. Okay, so now we're going to talk about colors, contrast, and texture. Very attractive color palette used at your booth. This is also a highlight of your in-person marketing. As I mentioned before, incorporating it into your signage, the table runner right here, the banners that you see on three sides. Very nicely done, and it's all tied into each other. Okay, so the two tablecloth approach is pretty cool. Something I can't say I've seen before in the booth review series. It enables you to inject some colors into your tables while maintaining a solid color, distraction-free look on the table tops. So this is a nice alternative to a table runner. Just make sure that there's no slack bunched up at the bottom that could create a tripping hazard or an unsightly appearance. So this one looks good. It's pulled pretty much down close to the floor. That's just about where you want it. Maybe to come a little bit further so we hide, any kind of boxes or totes that are underneath it. If we take a look at a couple of different angles, we can see that this one here in the center is maybe a little bit too far down. This one right here looks perfect though. So the table next to it on the left, that's exactly how you'd want to have it. Very close to the floor, but not rolled up. And then just showing enough of that to show that little bit of kind of tease of color that makes things interesting over there. So yeah, like I said, this is a really cool alternative to showing some color on the tabletop. And it just gives enough character to make things interesting while providing that black solid tabletop that is 100% distraction free. So very cool, very innovative. I really like the look of this. But as far as other colors go at the booth, we see a lot of white displays and there's white in the logo. Okay, so primary colors of the logo are the white, the very dark blue, and then the very light blue. Okay, so it's nice to see the white displays. I think it makes sense with the rest of the booth and things going on. So good choice there. The only thing with white, of course, is it's by far the hardest thing to keep clean. And with these racks that fold up and likely are stacked on top of one another, maybe what I would do is just have something in your car. Maybe if you stack these during transport, maybe just something that you can kind of put in between them so they don't scratch up against one another. And perhaps that'll extend the longevity and lifespan of these racks. But yeah, other than that, I think I like the look of it. And again, the colors, contrast, and texture, you've made some good decisions here that are smart, and it provides accents at the booth while also making sure that your products are the sole focus of everything that's happening here. So let's talk about strength of theme. You do a nice job of exploring the possibilities of glass work. I'll cycle through a little bit of the photos here and we'll get up close, and you can see that there's a lot of different shapes, sizes. We can see like more like decorative art pieces, whimsical up here. Then we have kind of more formal approaches down here. And there's some big pieces, there's small pieces, there are sort of like muted tones where they're a little bit safer, like, kind of in the blues here, they're a little bit safer. But then you go a little bit more vibrant where you've got, swirling lines up against some really solid, bold lines. Here we see that as well. Your pieces are really wonderful. I like them quite a bit. And again, there's just so many purposes and uses that you can shop for at this booth. So that's one of the things that I like quite a bit. But mainly what I'd like to say is that you do a really nice job of pushing the boundaries of glass work and glass art, but you're definitely staying within that realm. So your sun catchers, your jewelry, the stained glass, the bowls, the platters, even your test pieces. Viewers, if you hop onto Margaret's Facebook page and you check out the test pieces that she works with in order to, get the colors that are of Margaret's liking, even those are really cool. And I would seriously consider having little trays of those test pieces out at your booth and sell them for like $1 each or something like that as an entry level item to keep sales moving at your booth in between these bigger purchases. So that can be something that is, possibility at the booth if you aren't doing it already. Overall, great job exploring glasswork and being expressive with your ideas while staying within a cohesive theme at your booth. All right, now let's talk about accessibility. So nothing too major to worry about here, just some minor tidying up and precautions, mainly the tablecloths rolling up that we mentioned before. That can be something to kind of keep an eye on. And then those taller displays that we talked about earlier with a possible tipping situation. These, yes, they could get bumped into on the bottom right-hand corner, these potted planter type of displays, but that is a really, just minor thought to keep in mind. Maybe tuck them into the corner just a little bit further instead of having it stick out a little bit. But other than that, not too much going on here to worry about. I guess the one concern I would have with accessibility is that, again, you just want to have big open spacing at this booth because the items are fragile. And then the way that some of them are displayed are a little bit prone to tipping, okay, and prone to weather. Again, if you're outside and there's wind, some of these over here I'd be a little bit nervous about if the wind really pushed it. But of course, we're looking at an indoor event and I can't judge how you display something while looking at an indoor event if we're talking about outdoors. Okay, so I don't really want to go down that road, criticizing anything, but just keep that in mind. If you have an outdoor event, of course, just try and secure your things. If you do an outdoor show, you might be a really good candidate as a vendor who would use 3 walls. So 3 side walls on your canopy just to kind of control the wind on the inside. Be sure that if you do this, if you go with 3 walls, that you use quite a bit of weights on your tent. I was just at a craft fair yesterday and somebody's tent blew over, damaged another vendor's tent next door. One of the vendors was actually injured apparently. So yeah, that's just, a road that you don't want to go down, of course. So any vendor that uses 3 sidewall on their canopy, you probably just want to use more weights than normal, just because if wind gets in, it's just going to push up on the bottom of the tent. Okay. It's going to want to lift it up. So just keep that in mind and something to consider. But otherwise, accessibility, pretty good. Really wide open floor plan. So that was so nice to see with this particular booth. In a 20 by 10, sometimes people will want to bite off a little bit more than they can chew. In other words, they get more space in a 20 by 10, so they think, oh, okay, I should really pack it. And it's like, well, you still need to maintain that ability for people to walk through it comfortably, so you can't go too crazy with packing as much in as possible just because you've gotten a bigger footprint now. So you still got to maintain that balance. So good job with that. Just those couple of really minor tips with the accessibility. Otherwise, great job. All right, so now we're going to talk about general use of space. Nice layout, 20 by 10. This was a really nice angle of picture to look at, just to see it from a head-on point of view, what we would see it as if we were a shopper. And it's nice. You can kind of approach from a couple of different angles. If somebody's kind of blocking one area, you can still get in and check things out, so that's good. And it's open to accommodate plenty of shoppers. It also shows well in addition to being functional. The open nature gives you the ability to showcase your works outward exceptionally well. And that's really important for this type of booth where you have really beautiful glass work. And it's nice that, as we're standing back, this photo was probably taken about 10 or 20 feet away from the booth. And we're already seeing like some pretty intriguing works down here on the right side. These couple of focal points up front are nice, especially with like the little bits of lighting that you've, I think that you've applied lighting to this, or is this just a reflection? Either way, it's working, because it's kind of pulling some attention in. Over here, we see a lot of works that are displayed well against that white backdrop. So all in all, really cool. I like it quite a bit. And I know that a 20 by 10 does cost a little bit more upfront to reserve. So that is a bit of a bummer where it's like, okay, now that means I just have to sell even more to kind of hit my profit mark. But allowing ample room in your booth is really important as to not have a cramped in space when there's many fragile items around. Okay, now let's talk about the eye test. And the eye test is the 1 or 2 seconds that a shopper's walking by, and what are you doing as a vendor to get them to stop and check out your booth. So overall, you've got a wonderful booth. Again, you just started your vendor journey, and I'm going to be honest, your booth doesn't look like a vendor who's been doing this for 5 or 6 months. It looks much more advanced than that. So right off the bat, you got to feel pretty good about that. And you got to try to resist any kind of urge that discourages you, okay, or that you're discouraged because it's so early in your process. And although your setup looks fantastic, there's some skills that are going to come along the way that take a little bit of time to develop. I mean, just like the communicating with the shoppers, you'll get more and more comfortable as time goes on. Your setup and takedown, we'll talk about that in a moment, okay? Because that was one of the questions you had during this review. Your setup and takedown process is going to get smoother, more efficient. And not only is that going to give you a bigger window at the show, okay? Because keep in mind, your opportunities aren't just when the public is at your booth, okay? So other vendors shop from each other, and sometimes this can actually lead to pretty substantial sales at your booth is when other vendors shop from you. So the quicker that you can get set up, the more opportunity you're going to have with the vendors. And it's also going to lead you to be more energized, a little bit more on your feet when it's showtime, okay? And not like completely drained because you were still setting up when the event began, okay? So we're going to work on getting that down, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But your desire to learn, I can already tell it's going to pay dividends because your art is already sitting at a very high caliber. And the fact that you want to learn techniques and learn little tips of improvement, it's going to come together. It's going to come full circle. So just make sure to keep offering a wide range of products and a wide range of prices, and things are going to head in the right direction. Now, when it comes to glasswork, be sure that you keep offering guests secure packaging when they purchase an item. We're going to take a look at a different angle here really quick of your checkout and bagging area. really nicely done. I like the fact that you've got this kind of almost displayed outwardly because it shows people that, yes, if you make a purchase at my booth, I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to take care of the item that you just purchased from me and make sure that it's secure as you walk around the event, take it home and unpack it. All right. So, vendors, that's really important. If you sell anything that is in any way fragile, can get bumped into, damaged, whatever, it's important to show people. Be willing to show it like this that, hey, I'm going to basically take care of the fact that you invested money in my business and show appreciation by making sure that this gets home safely with you. So that's really nice to see. I like that a lot. Just keep that going, and that will, again, pay dividends down the road as you get more and more of a presence at shows in your area. So now that we got through the main part of the review, I'm going to talk about a couple of questions that Margaret had. And the first one was she wanted to know how to speed up the setup and takedown process of her booth. Okay. So this is a little bit difficult to comment on because there's only so many shortcuts that you can take before you start changing the appearance of the booth. Okay, so that, basically you make sacrifices here and there of, oh, I'm not going to display this, or I'll display it like, quite a bit differently. So I'll kind of just comment on how I see the booth right now. As we take a look at the booth as a whole, we did discuss these racks right here, and they are the foldable metal variety that I mentioned earlier. And for anybody who's interested in these racks, I've got a link below in the description that'll take you to where you can order these off of Amazon. So that's in the description if you're interested in these racks. But those are a huge shortcut, okay? So that is going to help you tremendously. Now, as we look around at other opportunities at the booth, one of the things that I see is this center table right here that could be a little bit of a chance to speed things up. Now, there's a trick that vendors will use with cling wrap, like basically like your food saver, stretch wrap, kitchen stuff that people use on the earring display and the jewelry display right here. Let me zoom in a little bit. Okay, and some of these items right here, if you take cling wrap and you wrap it around the display with everything still on it, that will save you a ton of time from taking things off, putting things back on. You can pretty much just wrap them and unwrap them. And not only is it nice for speed, but it's also a great way to transport things. It keeps things from getting damaged and scratched and scuffed. So that could be a little bit of an opportunity right there. Now, all in all, I think your booth is quite large. There's a lot being displayed, and what is being displayed is quite fragile. So those are pretty much, point A, point B, and point C that are up against you when it comes to having a really quick setup and tear down. Now, there's only so much speed that you're going to be able to have when it comes to this. What I would recommend is setting up and tearing down at home a few times and doing this in a situation where you're not under pressure, okay? And time yourself. When you do this at home, always time yourself, you guys, and see how long it takes for you to do this. And analyze things, take a look at it when you're doing them, and don't think about anything else other than, is every step of this necessary? Are there any shortcuts available? How can I speed this up? All of that. Okay. So it's nice to be able to do this at home in kind of like a distraction free environment, because at a show, when you're setting up, sometimes the organizer will come around and talk to vendors. Sometimes other vendors will stop by and say, hey, I like your stuff. And before you know it, a little conversation starts and time is slipping away. So these minutes, they all add up. They all mean something. And like I said, when you're putting your booth together and time is starting to slip away, and all of a sudden, before you know it, you're still setting up while the show is basically starting. You don't ever want to still be setting up when the show is open to the public. Okay. So whatever you have to do to get it to that point where you're at least set up by then, that's what you got to do. Okay. So You don't want to get into the habit of doing that, because not only, of course, is it taking away chances from you interacting with customers when your booth is fully set up, other vendors will not like it, okay? And the organizer for sure will not like it, okay? And it can actually get you literally banned from events from certain organizers, all right? So that's step one. We got to get you to the point where you're for sure set up by the time the event begins, okay? So let's get it to that point. Practice at home, maybe do the cling wrap trick, see if that helps. And then if you can't get it to that point, see if you can get a helper to come with you. If you can't get a helper to come with you, then after every other option has been exhausted, then you probably have to think about simplifying the setup and making some cuts of, what's going to be displayed and what's not going to be displayed at the booth. Okay. So be sure that you run through every other option before you do that, but you have to be set up by the time the show starts. Okay, the second question: any way to reduce product offerings or just stick with having many different options? Inconsistent sales means that there's no front running products. And basically what I mean by that, guys, is that sometimes you can look at like your sales history and see that something is lagging behind, or perhaps there's a really clear front runner where it's like, okay, maybe my booth should just be more about this and less about everything else. That's not really happening here, okay? So there's some shows where a certain type of product will do well, and then other shows where, something entirely different is doing well, and there's no clear front runner and there's no clear products lagging behind. So when that happens, I would just make sure that you're sticking to glass art. Okay. Just keep staying within the confines of your theme. As long as you're doing that, your booth will remain cohesive, which plays a big role in determining whether to phase certain products out of your booth. From a shopper's perspective, as long as a booth feels like it's one booth from one artist, that's probably what's most important. You get into a little bit of a danger zone as a vendor when you start branching out too much and you lose your identity. Is it a glass booth? Is it woodworking? Is it leather making? What is it now? The fact that it's still all glass work is great. So take your sales into account when determining whether or not you can cut something out. And when there isn't an obvious choice when it comes to adding or removing products based on sales performance, just keep rolling with it. It's okay to kind of just let things ride for a while and give it some time. And you never want to remove something just for the sake of removing it. Okay. We talked about removing something if it means that your setup is taking too long. Now that's a different story. So in that situation, you would have to try to identify some kind of product that's lagging behind at least a little bit. Okay. But other than that, when it comes to reducing offerings in order to stick to a theme, I think you're fine. I think you're just staying within the whole glasswork type of theme. So I wouldn't worry about that too much. Besides, your marketing materials, your banners, your signage, your price tags, even your gift bags and everything in the checkout area, that is all doing a really good job of keeping the booth feel cohesive. So that's not an issue at all. I really wouldn't worry about that too much. Now, the next question came to the website. She was asking if there's any sort of tips and tricks on maintaining a website. And something I would say right off the bat is getting more products listed. You have to commit to improvement online. And when people have big presences online, that doesn't happen by accident. I can guarantee you. I've tried my fair share of side projects, and it takes effort. It takes serious effort. Okay. So pretty much what you get into it, you're going to get out of it. All right. Product photography will help to improve how well your items are showcased. So that can definitely help. All right. This can translate into better sales without much additional effort or expense. So that's kind of a nice benefit. You don't really have to invest too much money, too much effort in order to really level up how your products are being showcased visually. So that is a nice option right there. So like I talked about with the light box before, that's something relatively simple that can make a pretty big impact on the way things look. And now finally, another question is that some people have mentioned to Margaret that perhaps she should be in juried art shows, so a more formal experience. And while people might suggest this, ultimately that's up to you, of course. What makes, you have to kind of define the situation now. So if somebody brings that up, you got to start thinking about it from the perspective of, okay, what makes a vendor ready for something like that? Perhaps there's more serious shoppers at an event like that, but it also likely comes with a more strict application process. A lot of times, juried art shows, when they're more and more formal, they are strictly looking for well-established veteran vendors who have kind of a track record behind them. So that can be a little bit of a challenge for you since you're on the newer side. But your items are showcased definitely in a more formal manner than I think most craft fair vendors. So I can definitely see how your booth presents more towards a juried art experience. Okay, so you've got that going for you. Really, the decision is up to you. Sometimes those events will come with a higher booth fee as well. So, you're going to have to make up more ground at the event in order to break even and then push beyond into the profiting territory. So that's another obstacle that you'd have to overcome as well. So what I would probably recommend is, maybe stick with craft fairs for year or two, and every region is different as well. So you're basically, from what I can tell, I think you're in like a suburb of Seattle, like you're in the Seattle region. I know nothing about that market as far as craft fairs. Okay. So I don't know if craft fairs tend to be more formal in general over there, or if they're super relaxed where you feel like you don't fit in. So that's kind of another thing to take into account too, is are you participating in events where the shopper demographic doesn't really feel like it's going to connect with what you're presenting? So visit some events. That's another tip that I can give. Visit a lot of shows. Visit shows that you'd have interest in. Talk to the vendors briefly. Don't rob all their time with customers, but see how they like it. If you can meet the organizer, cool. That's even better. Then you can talk to the organizer too, but get the vibe of shows that you want to participate in and work towards becoming part of those shows. So with that being said, this was episode 34 in the Craft Fair Booth Review series. If you want to get your craft fair booth reviewed, click on the join button below. Check out what it takes to become a channel member. There's a ton of perks that come with it. And one of the perks is being able to get your booth reviewed. So this was the 34th episode in the series. To check out all the other booth reviews, click on the playlist above. And thank you all so much for watching.